What's up, nerds and nerdettes? I'm back, finally. It's been a little while. I'll explain why in a minute. This episode is going to be really tough to get through for those just looking for some entertainment. I don't recommend watching it. Instead, I would actually click the banner at the top. That'll take you to a short. And that'll really give you the updates that you're looking for as far as, if you're just following this for entertainment and progression, go look at that. Don't watch the full episode. This episode is going to be a lot of external detail and just kind of making up for the deficiencies in the Revell kit. It's a lot of tedious work. I'm going to cover it more as a how-to. And so, honestly, if you're just here for the entertainment, go click the banner, watch a short. Everything in this video doesn't need to be longer than a minute if you're just looking for a status update. Anyway, so you saw originally that really sanding out panel lines is not the most efficient idea. Instead, this is. So taking an X-Acto blade, I like using the curved ones. They seem to work really well. And you're just going to scrape at that panel line about an 80-degree angle on the blade, and then move towards the acute side of that angle. And you're just going to scrape off that layer of plastic, and it'll come off nicely. It'll leave behind a little bit of a visual reference for where that line was, but really it's a good idea to pay attention to that so you can restore it properly. Curved lines are a pain. They're very difficult to put back, but take your time and really pay attention to what you're doing, and it'll work out. There's a couple of tools I'm using to put the lines back. So obviously you saw me using an X-Acto blade. Here I'm using a razor saw. The razor saw is really nice because it's got a good edge on it. It's really thin, really controllable, and you can use it kind of like with a ruler, and that will really help you get a good straight line. And then Tamiya makes a panel line engraving tool, which you saw briefly there. You'll see it again here in a little bit, actually in like 10 seconds. Yeah, right there. So Tamiya makes that. It's really nice, but it can get out of control relatively easily if you're not careful. Applying too much pressure on it, it'll start to follow weak points in the material rather than a straight line. And it can get away from you. So what I found best was if you score the surface with a razor saw, come back with the Tamiya engraving tool, and just deepen what you've already scored in. That worked out a whole lot better, and really gave me a much better, cleaner, sharper, straighter line. Obviously, I need to add a ton of rivets in. The B-17 is a rivet-manufactured aircraft, so every skin is riveted to every single structural rib, former, and longeron underneath it. That's a ton of rivets. Every break in the skin, where two skins come together, they overlap them. So this is one of the cases where a raised panel line is kind of acceptable. The problem is, if you were to do it accurately, the panel would be raised on one side, so it'd be flush to one side of that raised boss at where the panel line is. And then the other side would be kind of subflush to that panel line. And that would be actually how the airplane looks, because again, you've got an overlapping skin. So the two skins come together, and there's a rivet line that runs down them and rivets the joint of those two skins into the underlying structure of the aircraft. You'd always want to do that into underlying structure so you get the good strength. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to do a skin break there. One of the added details that I'm going for revolves around how this kit's going to be displayed. I think I covered, and if I didn't, this kit's not for me. So I've been working with the intended recipient of this and discussing how best to mount it, especially given some of the special things it's going to be mounted with that will be revealed probably in the next episode to a degree, just to make up for the sheer boredom that is this episode. And we haven't even got to the worst part yet, so just fasten your seatbelts. We're getting there. And so, really, the mounting of this aircraft is going to take quite a bit of intricacy to get right, and a lot of careful planning. And that's one of the things that's slowing me down at the moment is working around how to put the bomb bay together, because it's not going to be a bomb bay. It's not going to have bombs in it. It's not going to have any of the structure the B-17 actually has in it that you can see in the HKM video for the internal details, which I will link at the top of the screen right here. The Revell B-17 doesn't have any of that. I'm not going to scratch build that, and I don't even have space to do it anyway. So it'll become a little bit more evident and clear why in the next episode. Again, I owe you guys a more entertaining episode, and really all of this detailing is what slowed me down to the point that I haven't done a B-17 video in 2 months now. So thank you for bearing with me. Okay, here's the really tedious part. If you've ever seen the inside of a B-17, if you haven't, I'll put a couple pictures in the corner of the screen here. But if you have, you'll understand that, right, it's a warplane. It is not, your 737 passenger airliner where it's meant to look pretty on the inside. It is a functional aircraft as a weapon of war. What that means is there's no beautifying it on the inside. The skin is not smooth on the inside. You have all of the ribs, all of the formers going down the fuselage. You have stringers going around all of the fuselage. So you can see the entire structure of the airplane on the inside of the fuselage. It is not flat like this, or it's not smooth like this, right? And it's frustrating because there's so many windows into the side of the fuselage of the B-17. The waist gun windows are huge. There's windows in the radio room. There's windows throughout the bombardier's position. It's really frustrating that there's no detail in this, and it's even more frustrating if you get the Revell B-17G kit, which is the one I built previously. It's a much newer casting than the F model Rimpus Bell is, and it has the internal detail in it. It's like, I have a picture of it. I'll put it on the screen here. It's really, I've been on this subject and I keep coming back to it. It's just really frustrating, especially when this aircraft is like the most well-known B-17. It's just annoying and it's frustrating, and like, I understand that these molds are extremely expensive to produce for the company, but like, this is literally the chief reason why a lot of people don't buy these kits. So it's a double-edged sword, right? But I digress, and I also understand that this is why this kit is significantly cheaper than the HKM version of the same plane. I get it. It's frustrating from a builder's perspective because you get to a certain point and you just want more detail. Anyway, on the subject of additional detail, in order to make the ribs, I 3D printed some, I think, 1.5 inch diameter, for all intents and purposes, ribs. I made them about, 70 thousandths of an inch thick. I think that's about 2 millimeters, something like that. Made them roughly that size, and it seemed to come out relatively good in scale. And what I did was I kind of eyeballed, while wearing my very obnoxious NASA pajamas there, at the side of the screen. I need to adjust the camera angle for this. I kind of eyeballed and measured as best I could to get the spacing correct on all the ribs. The one thing that is tricky, and I wasn't able to replicate it, but I did close enough that I'm satisfied, is that the stringers that run up and down the fuselage lengthways, they aren't as tall as the ribs are, the ribs are in the fuselage. So they kind of pass through the ribs, and at the scales we're talking, it's very difficult to do that. Again, this is why it would be better as an injection molded detail rather than an added detail afterwards. If I had a internal scan, like 3D scan of the aircraft, I probably could have figured out to resin print a lattice kind of thing and then glued it in wholesale as one piece. Unfortunately, I don't have any 3D scanning equipment, but if somebody did and were to upload that somewhere like Thingiverse or something, that would pay dividends to all the people building this kit, honestly. And one day I'll talk about my personal opinion in resin printing detail for 3D kits and aftermarket parts, but it ain't this day. Anyway, so very tediously, I'm going down and installing each of these ribs one by one throughout the fuselage. I did both sides, left and right, and it's really important to check frequently once you've done one side and on the other side, because you want to make sure that the ribs meet at the intersection points between the fuselage. So one of the things that's a good idea would be to, measure it. Take a reference point, maybe get a piece of masking tape and mark out where you want each rib intersection to be, and then lay it along the seam line and mark into the actual plastic with a pencil or something where you want that rib to connect. And that should get you close enough that you don't have to worry about it. I did have some that needed adjusting, so I had to come back in very carefully, break the contact with the glue, and reposition them. But I think at the end of the day, I got it looking quite nice, honestly. It looks pretty good, and the added detail really does help the kit, I believe. We're not going to know fully until the kit's together and we can see into the various sections of the fuselage through one of the waist gun windows or one of the other windows. But I'll do some more detail about that when we have the kit closed up and we can really focus in on it. It's also important to note that the wing attach structure in the kit obviously doesn't reflect the actual airplane, and you're going to have a floor if you're doing like an internal radio room like I did. I'll show that off probably not next episode, but 2 episodes down the road. Next episode, I need to give you guys a little bit of relief from this because this is very tedious to watch. But yeah, you've got a floor, so you don't have to go all the way down into the wing connecting area, because that area is obscured anyway, and it should be because it's not correct to the actual aircraft, and we don't want to really be presenting that. Adding the stringers was very similar to doing the ribs. Kind of the same thing. I went to the 3D printer and printed out basically 11-inch straight sections of filament in a rectangular profile. The single most anticlimactic thing I think I've printed in months, going from battleship turret parts to straight lines of filament. Anyway, we'll get back to the battleship turret at some point. Linked at the top, and for those of you that haven't watched it yet. Didn't do as well as I would think it was going to do, honestly, but whatever. So stringer and rib wise, went ahead and just cut into the ribs around the stringers, trying to keep as tight a fit as possible to avoid having to put any additional filler back in there into the joint, and trying to keep that profile was very important. So as close as we can and keep going from there. This took forever, so I'm not showing all of it. I'm only showing really the installation of this one stringer, and only part of it at that. So it's the same process through every single rib all the way down the fuselage. Very boring, very tedious, very time consuming. Honestly, I just kind of sat and did it while doing other things. I could watch a movie or while playing a game with a friend or something like that. I just sit here and work on it progressively as I go. Important to make sure that the rib is fully glued in the area where you're attaching the stringer. Had a couple of times where the rib would pop up a little bit and then have to reset it and glue it, which took even longer. It was a whole process. Is it worth it? To me, yes. I'm an airplane nerd. Building this for an airplane nerd, it's important. So one of my pet peeves is, the lack of quality, but also there's like distinct rooms within the B-17's fuselage, one of which being the radio room. And there isn't a radio room in this kit. There's no radio details in this kit. And you know what? I wanted to fix that because there's several windows looking directly into where the radio room is. The radio operator has a gun sticking out the top of the aircraft. So relatively important, relatively visible. Wanted to make sure we got it correct. So I went ahead and through trial and error mapped the profile of the inside of the model kit. Again, anybody that's got a 3D scanner and wants to go ahead and upload a 3D scan of this kit to like Thingiverse or something, fantastic idea. So through trial and error, I went ahead and cut the forward bulkhead. Did the same in the rear. You're going to have to wait to see that though until not the next part, but the part after where we close up the fuselage. And from there, you can see all the rest of the stringers applied. The ones on the bottom I haven't done because they're not visible. And around the ball turret mount, I got to figure out what I'm doing ball turret wise because I'm not super satisfied with the way it's installed in the Revell instructions. Again, that's for a later time. So we'll go ahead and paint over the detail here, and you can kind of see it doesn't look too bad. It's not perfect. I will admit that, but it is going to be better than looking at nothing when you look in the window. And I'm pretty satisfied overall with the way it comes out, particularly as I look at it now, sitting on my desk in front of me. With additional detail added in, I think it looks a lot better than it would have without that. It's just something to break up that surface and give it a little bit of life. Framing around the windows in the bombardier area, important. Getting the right ribs in the correct areas around all the gun ports and all the visibility windows and things like that. So overall, I'm pretty pleased with the way this came out. Again, I know it's a boring episode. If you are still here, thank you. You guys are great. For those of you that are still here, the next episode will be revolving around the wing, or wings. I'm going to do a full buildup of a wing, including the electrical testing and engine buildup that I haven't shown yet, but have already actually done. And there'll be a couple of shorts attached to that as well. So thank you for sticking around. You guys are awesome. Again, I know this was a very boring one. But if you're still here, consider liking and subscribing. And I'll see you again in the next one. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit of time because we do have the holidays coming up, so that'll get in the way. But I do have a couple days off, so maybe I'll work something out. Thank you all, and have a great day.